What if the answers to your most pressing modern problems were actually discovered 2,400 years ago? In a world obsessed with the latest trends and quick fixes, the ancient philosopher who drank hemlock rather than compromise his principles might be the mentor you never knew you needed. I'm talking about Socrates, the original critical thinker whose wisdom has outlasted empires, technologies, and entire civilizations. Today, we're diving into the mind-bending, life-altering quotes of a man who never wrote a single book, yet changed human thought forever. Before we explore these transformative ideas, let me ask you, when was the last time you questioned your own assumptions? When did you last examine not just what you think, but how you think? This intellectual courage defined Socrates, an Athenian stonemason turned philosopher who lived from 470 to 399 BCE. Unlike today's self-help gurus selling 7 steps to success, Socrates claimed to know only one thing, that he knew nothing at all. This paradoxical humility made him the wisest person in Athens. Through his method of questioning, now called the Socratic method, he forced people to confront their contradictions and discover deeper truths. What makes his wisdom timeless? Unlike advice tied to specific technologies or cultural moments, Socratic wisdom addresses the unchanging aspects of human nature: our search for knowledge, our moral struggles, our desire for meaning, and our fear of death. In today's chaotic, distraction-filled world, these insights are more relevant than ever. Let's explore how this barefoot philosopher from ancient Athens can transform your 21st century life, one quote at a time. Quote Section 1. Knowledge and True Wisdom. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. In an age of information overload where everyone claims expertise on everything, this paradoxical statement might be Socrates' most revolutionary idea. Think about it. When you scroll through social media, how many experts do you encounter who speak with absolute certainty? Yet true intelligence begins with intellectual humility. When Socrates was told the oracle of Delphi had proclaimed him the wisest man in Athens, he was confused. He spent years questioning people who claimed knowledge, politicians, poets, craftsmen, only to discover they all thought they knew more than they did. Socrates concluded he was wiser simply because he recognized his limitations. How can this transform your life today? Start by embracing the phrase, "I don't know," not as an admission of failure, but as the beginning of authentic learning. The most innovative companies now value this beginner's mindset over rigid expertise. Studies show that acknowledging uncertainty actually makes you more credible, not less. The next time you're tempted to speak with absolute certainty or feel frustrated by not having all the answers, remember, recognizing the boundaries of your knowledge is the first step toward expanding them. The wisest people aren't those who claim to know everything, but those curious enough to question everything, including themselves. If you're finding value in these ancient insights, take a second to hit that like button. It helps others discover this content, and I'd appreciate knowing these timeless ideas resonate with you. Quote Section 2. The Examined Life. The unexamined life is not worth living. This might be Socrates' most famous declaration, spoken during his trial when faced with execution. Rather than flee Athens or abandon his principles, he chose death, believing a life without philosophical reflection wasn't worth preserving. But what does an examined life actually mean for us today? It's not about endless navel-gazing or overthinking. Rather, it's about conscious awareness instead of mindless autopilot. How many of us drift through our days, scrolling, consuming, working, without ever asking the deeper questions? Why am I doing this? What matters to me? What kind of person am I becoming? The average person makes about 35,000 decisions daily, yet how many are conscious choices rather than unconscious habits? Socrates would urge us to question our assumptions, examine our values, and align our actions with our highest principles. Try this Socratic practice. At the end of each day, ask yourself 3 questions. What went well today? What could I have done better? What did I learn about myself? This simple reflection can interrupt the cycle of mindless living and transform ordinary experiences into opportunities for growth. Remember, self-examination isn't about harsh self-judgment. It's about curiosity and growth. As Socrates demonstrated through his dialogues, the goal isn't to arrive at final answers, but to engage in the ongoing process of questioning. An examined life isn't perfect, it's awake. Quote, Section 3, focus on what matters. The secret of happiness, you see, is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. In our consumer culture of endless upgrades and accumulation, this Socratic wisdom strikes at the heart of modern discontent. Socrates himself lived simply, often going barefoot, wearing the same cloak year-round, and showing little interest in wealth or status. When walking through the marketplace, he famously remarked, "How many things there are which I do not need." This wasn't mere asceticism, it was strategic minimalism. By reducing external distractions and material concerns, Socrates created space for what truly mattered: meaningful conversations, intellectual growth, and moral development. The science confirms he was on to something profound. Studies consistently show that beyond meeting basic needs, additional wealth and possessions contribute surprisingly little to happiness. Meanwhile, experiences, relationships, and purpose correlate strongly with life satisfaction. How can you apply this wisdom? Consider a Socratic audit of your life. What possessions, commitments, or pursuits are cluttering your existence without adding value? What would happen if you redirected that energy toward deeper relationships, learning, or contributing to others? True wealth, Socrates would argue, isn't measured by what you have, but by what you can live happily without. If you're finding these ancient insights valuable for your modern life, consider subscribing to our channel. We explore timeless wisdom like this regularly, and I'd love to have you join our community of thoughtful individuals. Quote, Section 4, the power of questions. I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. Unlike many thought leaders today who position themselves as gurus with all the answers, Socrates saw himself as a midwife of ideas, helping others give birth to insights already within them through skilled questioning. This approach, now called the Socratic method, involves asking progressive questions that lead people to examine their assumptions and discover inconsistencies in their thinking. Rather than imposing his views, Socrates helped people reach their own conclusions. How revolutionary is this in our polarized era? Instead of trying to convince others through assertions and arguments, what if we asked thoughtful questions that sparked genuine reflection? Try this experiment. In your next disagreement, resist the urge to counter-argue. Instead, Ask questions like, what experiences led you to that view? Or how would you respond to this potential concern? Notice how the conversation transforms from a debate to be one into an exploration to be shared. The most powerful influence doesn't come from telling people what to think, but from helping them think more clearly for themselves. As the ancient saying goes, give a person an answer and they'll have information for a day. Teach them to question and they'll learn for a lifetime. Quote, Section 5, prioritizing inner wealth. Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Though not directly attributed to Socrates in ancient texts, this sentiment perfectly captures his ethical outlook. Socrates consistently emphasized that our treatment of others reveals our own character, and that moral excellence was more valuable than material success. He explicitly taught, wealth does not bring about excellence, but excellence makes wealth and everything else good for men, both individually and collectively. In a culture obsessed with external metrics, followers, income, status, Socrates redirects our attention to the quality of our character. The question isn't whether you're better off than others materially, but whether you're becoming a better version of yourself ethically. Consider how this reframes success. The truly successful person isn't necessarily the wealthiest or most famous, but the one who has cultivated wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. These inner qualities remain when external circumstances change. Practical application? Before pursuing your next external achievement, ask yourself, how is this helping me become the person I want to be? Am I growing in wisdom and character, or just in possessions and accomplishments? Remember, as Socrates taught, we ultimately answer to ourselves. External validation may feel good temporarily, but internal integrity sustains us through life's inevitable challenges. Quote, Section 6, ignorance versus wisdom. There is only one good knowledge and one evil ignorance. This striking statement reveals Socrates' conviction that moral failings stem primarily from ignorance rather than malice. He believed that once someone truly understood what was good and right, they would naturally choose it. Therefore, education wasn't just about acquiring information, but about moral development. This perspective offers a revolutionary approach to both self-improvement and conflict resolution. When you make a mistake or poor choice, instead of harsh self-criticism, ask, what didn't I understand? What wisdom was I missing? Similarly, when others act in harmful ways, consider what education or understanding they might lack, rather than assuming bad intentions. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but reframes how we address it. Instead of mere punishment or condemnation, we focus on expanding awareness and understanding. As Socrates demonstrated through his dialogues, helping someone recognize contradictions in their thinking is more transformative than simply telling them they're wrong. In our polarized society, this wisdom is desperately needed. Rather than demonizing those who disagree with us, what if we approach differences with genuine curiosity about what insights or experiences might be missing on either side? If these philosophical insights are helping you see your life differently, take a moment to share this video with someone who might benefit. Knowledge grows when shared, and I'd be grateful for your help spreading these timeless ideas. Quote, Section 7, facing mortality, death may be the greatest of all human blessings. These surprising words came from Socrates as he faced his own execution. Rather than fearing death, he approached it philosophically, considering it either dreamless sleep, which would be peaceful, or a transition to another realm where he could question great figures of the past, which would be fascinating. This radical acceptance of mortality stands in stark contrast to our death-denying culture. We spend billions on anti-aging products, avoid discussing death, and often treat it as the ultimate failure rather than a natural part of existence. Yet research shows that contemplating mortality, what psychologists call mortality salience, can paradoxically enhance life satisfaction. It clarifies priorities, deepens appreciation, and reduces anxiety about trivial concerns. Socrates' approach to death reveals his larger philosophy. What matters isn't how long you live, but how well you live. A brief existence aligned with truth and virtue is preferable to a long life of compromise and confusion. Try this Socratic exercise. If you learned you had 1 year left to live, what would change about your priorities? What would you stop postponing? What relationships would you invest in? Then ask yourself, why wait? The clock is ticking for all of us, whether we acknowledge it or not. By facing mortality thoughtfully, we can transform death from a feared enemy into a wise teacher that shows us what truly matters. Quote, Section 8. The purpose of education. Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel. In this profound metaphor, Socrates challenges our contemporary approach to learning. Too often, education is treated as a passive process of accumulating information, filling the vessel. But true learning, Socrates argued, is about igniting curiosity and the capacity for independent thought. This distinction matters enormously in our information-saturated era. We don't lack access to facts. We're drowning in them. What we need is the wisdom to evaluate information critically, connect disparate ideas, and apply knowledge meaningfully to our lives. Consider how this transforms parenting, teaching, or even self-education. The goal isn't to memorize more content, but to cultivate the flame of wonder, critical thinking, and intellectual courage. Socrates would argue that a child who asks thoughtful questions is learning more than one who recites answers. For your own development, ask, are you merely consuming information or actively engaging with ideas? Are you challenging your assumptions and pursuing questions that matter to you personally? True education isn't measured by credentials or trivia mastered, but by your capacity to think clearly about complex issues. The most valuable education, as Socrates demonstrated, teaches you not what to think, but how to think. Quote, Section 9. The path to change. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. While this quote comes from a fictional version of Socrates in Way of the Peaceful Warrior, it beautifully captures his constructive approach to transformation. Rather than merely criticizing existing institutions or beliefs, Socrates offered alternative methods of inquiry and living. This principle applies powerfully to personal change. How often do we focus on battling our bad habits rather than cultivating new ones? Research in neuroscience confirms that it's easier to build new neural pathways than to erase existing ones. The most effective transformation comes not from fighting what you don't want, but from consistently practicing what you do want. Similarly, in relationships and communities, lasting change rarely comes from combat, but from creation. Instead of exhausting yourself arguing against problematic ideas, invest that energy in demonstrating better alternatives. Consider an area where you desire change. What would it look like to focus less on fighting what's wrong and more on building what's right? This isn't about ignoring problems, but about directing your primary energy toward constructive solutions. As Socrates showed through his teaching method, sometimes the best way to displace a limiting idea is to cultivate a more compelling one. These 9 Socratic insights, embracing humility, examining your life, focusing on what matters, asking powerful questions, prioritizing inner development, understanding the roots of ignorance, facing mortality wisely, kindling educational flames, and building the new, form a comprehensive philosophy for thriving in our complex world. What makes these ancient ideas so relevant today? Unlike trendy advice tied to specific technologies or cultural moments, Socratic wisdom addresses the unchanging aspects of human experience: our search for truth, our moral challenges, our need for meaning, and our inevitable confrontation with mortality. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Socrates was his consistency. He lived his philosophy to the end, choosing execution over compromise when Athens attempted to silence his questioning. His final words instructed a friend to sacrifice a rooster to Asclepius, the god of healing, suggesting he viewed death as a cure rather than a punishment. As we navigate our own challenges, Socrates reminds us that the goal isn't to accumulate more or impress others, but to pursue wisdom through persistent questioning, align our actions with our highest values, and cultivate inner excellence regardless of external circumstances. The hemlock that ended Socrates' life couldn't kill his ideas. They continue to challenge and inspire us, offering not easy answers, but something far more valuable: better questions. In a world of complexity and distraction, perhaps this is exactly what we need. If you've made it this far, you clearly value wisdom that stands the test of time. Hit subscribe to join our community exploring timeless ideas. Tap the notification bell to stay updated on new releases, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Which Socratic quote resonated most with you, and how might you apply it to your life this week? Remember, as Socrates taught us, the conversation is where the real learning happens. Until next time, keep questioning, keep examining, and keep building the life of wisdom you deserve.